There's this thing that happens in certain parking lots late at night. You feel it before you see it. It's not a sound exactly. It's more like the absence of the right sounds. The way the air goes flat in particular. The way your neck does that thing where it tightens without your permission, and your body starts doing math your brain hasn't caught up to yet. Maya Reyes knew that feeling. She'd known it since she was 11 years old, standing outside a bodega on Amsterdam Avenue, while her mother took too long inside, and a man sat on a car hood 3 feet away and just watched. Not moving, not saying anything, just sitting there like a stone that had learned to breathe and had decided it had opinions about her. That was the first time her body spoke before her brain did. She didn't know what it was saying, not then. She just knew it was saying something. 22 years later, walking across the nearly empty parking structure attached to the Riverside Commons Shopping Center in Claremont, North Carolina, at 11:47 on a Tuesday night in late October, her body started talking again. She'd been working a double. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a night manager at a mid-tier retail chain. Not the bad pay. Not the fluorescent lights that make everyone look slightly post-apocalyptic. Not even the customers who decide that 9 p.m. on a Tuesday is the ideal time to return a blender they clearly used for 3 months, and are now claiming arrived broken. No. The thing nobody tells you is how your body stops registering time as a linear experience. You go in when it's light. You come out when it's a different kind of dark. There's no transition. No sunset. No dusk. Just the sliding doors opening. And suddenly you're in a different world that's technically the same day. Maya had done this particular double, 10 a.m. to midnight, 11 times in the past 6 weeks. Her assistant manager had quit in September. His replacement had lasted 4 days. So now it was just Maya and a rotating cast of college kids who were very committed to checking their phones, and a woman named Denise, who was 63, and had worked there longer than Maya had been alive, and who sometimes brought in banana bread that was so good, it felt like it was apologizing for something. Tonight Denise had gone home at 8. The college kids had clocked out at 10. Maya had closed up alone, which was against corporate policy, but was also corporate policy's fault for not replacing 2 managers in 6 weeks. And she had balanced the registers, and she had done the security check, and she had set the alarm, and she had done all the small physical rituals of closing a retail store that nobody outside retail understands. The tucking in quality of it. The making sure everything is in its place before you leave it in the dark. She was tired in her teeth. That's the only way she could describe it later. Not sleepy, not sore. Tired in her teeth. The kind of tired that starts in a specific muscle group and spreads. She was walking to her car. Row C, spot 14. She'd parked there on purpose this morning because it was close to the stairwell, and the stairwell had a working camera. A fact she'd noted without letting herself examine too hard why she was noting it. The parking structure had 4 levels. Maya was on the 3rd. At this hour, it was maybe 15% occupied. Scattered cars mostly belonging to the late-night restaurant workers from the restaurants on the ground floor of the Commons. A few overnight parked vehicles that probably shouldn't have been there, and 1 or 2 cars that belonged to the kinds of people who use the phrase, "It was just a misunderstanding," a lot. The lights on the 3rd level were fine, mostly. There was 1 bank of fluorescents near the elevator that had been flickering for going on 3 weeks, and that facilities management had been informed about via the tenant complaint system twice, and via a direct call once, and via an email once, and had thus far resolved by doing absolutely nothing, which meant that every night when Maya walked through that section, there was this stroboscopic quality to the light that made the world feel slightly like a fever dream. She was walking through that section now. Her heels, she'd switched to flats at 7 because her feet had been screaming at her in the specific dialect feet speak after hour 9, but she still thought of the walk to her car in terms of heel sound, the way you remember a song in a key you've stopped playing it in. Her heels weren't clicking, but she could hear them in her head anyway. Click, click. Her keys were in her right hand. She held them the way her mother had taught her to hold them. Longest key protruding between the index and middle finger, which she'd later learned from the internet was biomechanically not as effective as movies suggest, but which felt like something, felt like intention, and intention mattered. She was 15 feet from her car, Spot 14. A 2019 Civic in a blue that the dealership had called Aegean, and that Maya had always privately thought looked exactly like the color of a bruise at day 3, when it's going yellow around the edges and the center is still deep and particular. She'd loved it immediately. She was 15 feet from the car when she felt it. That thing in the air. She didn't stop walking. This is important. Later, people would ask her sister would ask, her mother would ask, a detective named Rafferty would ask in a different and more official way, why she hadn't stopped walking when she noticed something was wrong, and she would try to explain the specific calculus of that moment, the way that stopping feels like announcement, like I know you're there, like handing over the power of the next move. As long as you keep walking, you still have momentum. You're still a moving target. You're still a person going somewhere. The moment you stop, you become a person who stopped. So she kept walking, but her body was doing its math. 3 sounds that didn't belong. 1. Footsteps, not echoing the way solo footsteps echo, but with that doubled quality that happens when someone is trying to step in time with your steps and isn't quite managing it. 2. Breathing, someone breathing wrong, breathing controlled in the way that takes effort, the way breathing sounds when someone is trying not to sound like they're running. 3. The click of a car door that was too far away for anyone to have walked to in the time since she'd noticed the first sound. There were 3 of them. Her body knew it. Her brain was 2 steps behind, still negotiating, still auditing, still asking, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Could this be?" Her body was already sure. 3 people, 2 behind her, 1 flanking from the left between the parked cars, working toward the end of the row to cut off the angle to the stairwell. 15 feet. She had 15 feet to her car, and if she could get the door open, and get inside, and get the lock down, the lock that auto-engaged when you shifted into drive, thank you Honda, she'd be fine. She'd be in a metal box with the engine running, and she'd be fine. 13 feet. She didn't run. Running was also announcement. Running was she knows, go. 11 feet. She was finding the key with her thumb. The Civic key had a particular edge along the bow, a slight imperfection from where she'd dropped it on pavement 8 months ago, and bent the housing just slightly, and her thumb knew that imperfection the way you know the edge of a particular scar, by feel, without looking. 9 feet. Hey. That was all. Just hey. She knew when she told it later that people would say that wasn't enough to be afraid of. That hey was just a word, that it could have been anything, and she would try to explain, and would fail to explain, because it is the kind of thing that language is not built for, what that particular hey sounded like. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't even really directed at her as a person. It was the kind of hey that is a test, a pebble thrown into water to see how the surface reacts. How much ripple, how much alarm. She did not react. 7 feet. Hey yo, I'm talking to you. Still she walked. 5 feet. The one from the left was emerging now, from between a pickup truck and a Jeep, stepping into the lane, positioning. She saw him in her peripheral vision, and her peripheral vision said, young, male. Something in his right hand she didn't want to look directly at, because looking directly at it would mean her brain had confirmed it, and her brain was still, heroically, stupidly, trying to negotiate. She hit the unlock button. The Civic's lights flashed once, blinked awake like a small animal startled. 3 feet. She was reaching for the handle, and the one from the left said, "Don't do that." And the 2 from behind were no longer pretending to match her pace. They were just running now, footsteps like gunshots in the concrete echo chamber of this particular Tuesday night, in this particular parking structure, in this particular life she'd been living. She got the handle. She got the handle. Her fingers wrapped around it, cold steel, and she pulled hard, and the door was opening. She was 2 inches of clearance from getting inside, and one of the ones from behind hit her like a shoulder check from a direction she wasn't braced for, and the door swung the wrong way, swung back, and she went sideways into the frame of the car, and the impact sent stars across the right side of her vision, and her keys went somewhere that wasn't her hand. That was when she really understood what was happening. Not before. Right then. The keys hitting concrete somewhere below her and behind her, making a sound like a small thing that had given up. That was when she understood. She did not scream. She thought about this a lot, later. She thought it said something about her that she wasn't sure she liked. She didn't scream. Instead, she pushed off the car frame, spun, put her back against the Civic's rear door, and the three of them were there. Right there. Close enough that she could smell cigarette smoke on the one on the right, something sweet and chemical on the middle one, the one who'd shoulder-checked her, and the one on the left, the one who'd positioned himself first, who'd said, "Don't do that." He smelled like nothing at all, like empty air, which was somehow the worst thing. Three of them. She put their ages between 19 and 24. The middle one was the biggest, thick through the shoulders in a way that had probably started in a gym and then continued in places gyms didn't prepare you for. The right one was lean and fast-looking, the way greyhounds are lean and fast-looking. Like speed was his specific competency. The left one, the one who smelled like nothing, was the one who was running this. She could tell by how still he was. The other two were amped, burning. She could see it in their hands, in their jaw muscles, in the particular quality of their stillness. That isn't stillness. The left one was actually still. He had the kind of stillness that comes from having done something enough times that the chemistry of it doesn't fire anymore. Not calm, not brave, just processed this, filed it away, running on subroutine. That scared her more than anything else. "Okay," he said. Not loud. Conversational. "Don't," Maya said. "Don't what?" "I've already called 911, she said, which was a lie. She had not. Her phone was in her jacket pocket, and getting to it meant moving her hands, and moving her hands meant, "Okay," he said again. Like it didn't matter. Like even if it were true, which he could probably tell it wasn't. It didn't shift his calculation at all. "I've got $20, she said. "I've got a phone that's 2 years old. I've got a debit card to an account that has $143 in it, because it's the end of the month. Take it. Take all of it." He tilted his head. "That's not what we're here for," he said. And that was when the cold got into her differently than the October air had gotten into her. The October air had been the regular cold, the seasonal cold, the cold that is just weather and means nothing except that winter is coming, and you should have grabbed a heavier jacket. This cold was different. This cold was the cold from inside, the cold that starts in your gut and radiates outward, the cold that is your body saying this is bad, in the only language it has left when words have failed. "You should have parked somewhere else," the left one said. Like it was her fault. Like it was that simple. Like the organizing logic of the universe ran directly through her parking choices, and she'd made the wrong one, and here were the consequences. "You warned her," the middle one said, to the left one. Not to Maya, about Maya, like she wasn't there. "You warned her last week." Maya blinked. Last week. Last week there had been... She'd been walking to her car. Different night. Maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. And there had been a group of young men near the elevator, and one of them had said something. She'd thought it was directed at someone else. She'd thought. She hadn't thought. She'd walked past, and she'd gotten in her car, and she'd driven home. And she hadn't let herself think about it, because thinking about it would have meant deciding to do something about it. And doing something about it meant going to building management. And going to building management meant filling out a form. And the form went into a system. And the system was run by a company that had 11 complaints pending from this building alone, and had resolved exactly 0 of them in the past calendar year. So she hadn't thought about it. And now the middle one was saying you warned her, like the warning was the procedurally important part, like the warning was what converted this from arbitrary violence into something with a logic she was supposed to have understood. She hadn't understood. She understood now. But now was too late. The middle one moved first. That was the thing about big ones. They were often first because size was itself a decision. Size said, "I don't have to be smart. I just have to arrive." And so they arrived, reached for her arm, and she pulled back hard, slammed back against the Civic's door, and the alarm went off. She'd forgotten she'd touched the handle. Triggered the sensor. The Civic's alarm went off like an accusation. Loud, wrong, blaring out into the concrete space and bouncing back off every surface multiplied. The lean one, the right one, said something she couldn't hear over the alarm, and the left one's face changed. Not much, just a tightening around the eyes. The first real emotion she'd seen on him. Annoyance. He was annoyed. The alarm was an inconvenience. He looked at the middle one and made a gesture with 2 fingers, and the middle one grabbed her arm, and she didn't think. Her body went before her brain again. Her body did the thing her brain would never have authorized in time. She slammed the heel of her free hand into the middle one's nose, which connected, and connected hard, and made a sound she'd never made anything make before. And the middle one made a sound too. A sound like shock and pain braided together, and he let go. For 3 seconds she was free. 3 seconds. She went for the gap between the Civic and the car in front. A minivan, she'd noticed it this morning. Had thought the bumper stickers were funny. There was one that said "Powered by Spite," and she'd felt a kinship with it. And now she was trying to use it as a path, and the lean one cut that off, and then she was between cars with the lean one on one side and the big one. Blood on his lip. Rage where the subroutine had been. On the other. The left one was still by the Civic. Not moving. Watching. Done? He asked. She was not done. But she was also not done in any way that was going to matter here. Between these cars, with her keys somewhere on the ground and her phone in her pocket, and her heart doing something terrifying behind her sternum. Last chance, she said. The lean one laughed. The middle one did not laugh. He was touching his lip with the back of his hand and looking at the blood, and he was very done with whatever portion of this was polite. Last chance for what? The lean one said. She opened her mouth. And then, from somewhere on the other side of the parking level, from somewhere past the flickering fluorescent bank, from somewhere in the particular dark between 2 pools of working light, a voice. One word. Hey. It stopped all of them. The lean one, the middle one, the left one, who had been so still, who was suddenly not still. All of them. Because this hey was different from the first hey, the one they'd used on Maya. This one had a register to it that was difficult to describe, and impossible to mishear. It wasn't loud. It was not particularly loud, but it carried in the way that specific frequencies carry. The way a low note carries through walls that higher notes can't penetrate. The way certain voices enter a room before their owners do. There was no question in it. No curiosity. No greeting. Just a man who had spoken one word, and was now waiting to see if the word needed to be followed by anything else. Maya couldn't see him yet. The flickering lights were between her position and his voice. Just that strobing, wrong frequency light and a shape resolving out of the dark. The left one, the still one, the subroutine one, said something quiet to the other 2. The lean one's posture changed, not softened, reoriented. The way a weather vane changes direction. Same hardware, different data. And then the shape came through the flickering lights. Later, when she tried to describe him to her sister on the phone that night, sitting on her bathroom floor with a cup of tea gone cold in her hands, she'd say, "He didn't look like what you'd expect." And her sister would say, "What do you mean?" And Maya would sit there for a second, trying to find the right container for what she was trying to say. "He looked like someone's dad," she'd finally say. Like somebody's extremely quiet, extremely calm dad who had just been interrupted during something perfectly reasonable he was doing, and was now here instead, and was not particularly disturbed by the substitution. He was maybe 40, maybe 42. Medium height. Solid in the way that isn't about size but about distribution. The way he occupied his space suggested that every part of him was exactly where it was supposed to be, and had been there long enough to stop needing to prove anything. Dark jacket. Work boots. Not fashion boots. Actual boots. The kind with dried mud at the edge of the sole. He was carrying a paper bag. A grocery bag. The brown paper kind, twisted closed at the top. In his left hand, like he'd been headed somewhere particular with it, and had stopped being headed there. and was holding the bag the way you hold something when your hands need to do something, while the rest of you decides what to do. His face was, there's a word for it that doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. Neutral, not blank, neutral. The way a gun is neutral. Not at rest, not deployed, somewhere in between, subject to subsequent decisions. He looked at the three of them. He didn't look at Maya, not yet. He looked at the three of them the way you look at a math problem that isn't particularly difficult, but that you want to solve correctly the first time. Evening, he said. Still not loud. The left one said nothing. The lean one said, keep walking, man. The man with the grocery bag looked at him for a moment. I would, he said, but... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. But hung there in the parking structure air like a period that was pretending to be a comma. The left one said something again, quiet, to the others. His voice had changed, just slightly. The way a frequency shifts when the source gets close to something it doesn't have data on yet. Not fear. Not quite. Something adjacent to caution, and the distance between the two was something this particular man had clearly understood for a very long time. This isn't your business, the left one said, directed at the man. No, the man agreed. Pause. Here anyway. Another pause. You want to walk away from this, and I'll pretend I didn't see anything, the lean one said. That's a good deal. I'm giving you a good deal. The man set his grocery bag down. He set it down with a care that was almost gentle, setting it upright, adjusting it slightly so it wouldn't tip, like whatever was inside it mattered to him and he wanted to make sure it was okay before he gave his full attention to other things. Then he straightened up, and he looked at the lean one. That's a good deal for you, he said. His voice hadn't changed in volume, in pitch, in anything measurable, but something in the room had changed. The air, the math. Last chance, he said. And he said it to all three of them. Not threatening, not performing, just informational. The way you say last exit before the toll on a highway. Factual, neutral, an offered off-ramp, accepted or declined. The middle one, the big one, the one Maya had hit, whose lip was still split, and whose pride was doing what pride does in those situations, which is make bad decisions on behalf of its host. The middle one made his choice. He went for the man. And here is the thing. Here is the thing that Maya would try to explain for months, and would fail to explain adequately, and would finally just stop explaining because it resisted language. It wasn't like the movies. It was nothing like the movies. In the movies, a man who can fight does a thing that takes several seconds and involves positions and impacts and the visible transfer of force, and you can track what's happening, you can follow the choreography, you can understand the sequence. What happened when the middle one went for this man? What happened was so compressed, so dense with decision and execution, that Maya's brain, afterward, could only give her a kind of rough edit. The sense of it, not the specifics. What she could tell you, the middle one went forward, and then he wasn't going forward anymore. What she could tell you, there was a sound, not a dramatic sound, not the sound of something breaking, not a crack or a crash, a muffled sound, the sound of force absorbed. What she could tell you, the middle one was on the ground. Between the going forward and the being on the ground, there had been maybe 1.5 seconds, maybe 2, maybe less. Her brain didn't have the frame rate for what had happened in that time. It had only the before and the after. The before, middle one moving. The after, middle one on the ground, arm at an angle that wasn't exactly wrong, but wasn't exactly right either, making a sound that was the sound of someone who has just had the full operational reality of a situation explained to them faster and more clearly than they were prepared for. The lean one moved. He was faster than the middle one. She'd clocked that early. And he came in differently, lower, smarter, from the side. And what happened was different from what happened with the middle one, but the outcome had a similar structural quality. He was a person moving, and then he was a person who had stopped moving, Except in this case he'd stopped moving by landing against the side of the minivan, the powered-by-spite minivan, and making the minivan ring like a bell, a brief and startled sound, and then sliding down it to a sitting position with both hands up. Both hands up. Not as a gesture of surrender exactly, more as a man who had just received specific and overwhelming information and was pausing to process it. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. The whole thing, start to finish. The man was already looking at the left one. The left one. The still one. Who had been so still this whole time, and who had been running this? Who had been the decision maker? Who had watched the warning fail and the approach succeed, and the shoulder check connect? And who had watched Maya's keys go skittering across concrete? And who had said, "That's not what we're here for," in that particular voice that had put the real cold into her? Who had watched all of that, and had sent his people in, and had stood at a remove? That one. The man looked at that one. And for the first time, the left one was not still. His weight shifted. Not much. Barely perceptible. But it was there. Maya saw it. The man certainly saw it. Something in the left one's very precise and very experienced stillness had cracked. Not in the direction of aggression. In the direction of something else. The man picked up his grocery bag. He walked toward the left one. Unhurried. He stopped at the appropriate distance. Not close enough to be reckless. Not far enough to be casual. Exactly the distance that said, "I have made a calculation about you, and this is where the calculation put me." He looked at the left one for a moment. The left one looked at him. "We done?" the man asked. A long pause. The left one said nothing, but he stepped back. 1 step. And that step was the answer. He went. He said something, quiet, almost inaudible, to the lean one, who was getting up from against the minivan, who shot a look at the man that had approximately 17 layers of meaning in it, and then decided not to do anything about any of them. The middle one was getting up more slowly. His arm was fine. It was fine. The man hadn't broken it, hadn't needed to break it, but the specific muscles and tendons involved in the arm were currently delivering a detailed report about what had just happened to them, and the middle one was listening to that report with his face. They went. Across the parking level, into the stairwell. The door banged shut behind them. The echo of the bang lasted a long time in the concrete space, bouncing back and forth, diminishing, until it was gone. And then it was just Maya, and the man, and the Civic's alarm, which was still going. The man reached into his jacket pocket, produced a pen, leaned down, and hooked the loop of Maya's keychain with the pen's tip, and picked it up and held it out to her. She stared at it. She took it. She pressed the button and the alarm stopped, and the silence was so total it almost hurt. She pressed her back against the Civic and put her hands on her knees and breathed. 1 breath. 2. The man stood there, grocery bag in hand, not saying anything, not performing comfort, not explaining himself, just standing there, with the patience of someone who has been in enough situations to know that the person who just came through one needs a moment and that the moment should not be filled. After a while, could have been 30 seconds, could have been a minute, she genuinely couldn't say. She straightened up. She looked at him. He looked back. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. She looked down at her keys in her hand, then back up at him. "Who are you?" she asked. He shifted the grocery bag to his other hand. "Just parked on level 2, he said, which was an answer that was technically accurate and contained almost none of the information the question had been asking for, and which she would spend the next several weeks trying to find the rest of. His name was Daniel Holt. He found that out later that night. Not from him, he didn't volunteer it. He didn't volunteer much of anything. But from the detective, Rafferty, who showed up 22 minutes after Maya's hands had stopped shaking enough to dial 911, who took her statement in the parking structure, while his partner took a separate statement from Daniel Holt by the stairwell, and who said, at the end of it, almost as an aside, the way cops deliver the things that are actually the main point. "You're lucky he was here." Who is he? Maya asked. Daniel Holt. Rafferty clicked his pen. Retired Navy. And something in the way Rafferty said Navy, with a very specific flatness, the way you say a word that has a lot more words behind it that you've decided not to say, made Maya look at him differently. What kind of Navy? She said. Rafferty looked up from his notepad. The kind that doesn't usually talk about what kind, he said. Daniel Holt had been in Claremont for 4 months. He'd moved there from Virginia Beach, which anyone who knows anything about the Navy understands is a zip code that functions less as a place and more as a state of being. He'd moved for reasons he didn't discuss, rented a 2-bedroom house on Meridian Street that was too large for one person, and that he'd furnished in the way of someone who didn't yet know if they were staying. A bed, a couch, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, and more books than furniture. He was 41 years old. He'd spent 20 years in the United States Navy, with a career that looked, on paper, like a series of assignments at increasingly rarefied addresses. Assignments that in official documentation were described in language so thoroughly bureaucratic and technical that it told you exactly nothing about what had actually happened in the places those assignments referred to. He'd been a SEAL since he was 22, Senior Chief by 34, Master Chief by 38. He'd left at 40, which is not unusual. 40 is the age at which the body starts sending memos about the mortgage it has been paying without consultation and requesting that some consideration be given to its future needs. And the body of a man who has spent 18 years doing what Daniel Holt's body had done sends those memos with particular urgency. And he'd left with a handshake and a flag and a set of commendations that he kept in a box in the closet on Meridian Street and never took out, not because he wasn't proud, but because the pride was between him and the men who'd been there, and taking it out and looking at it alone felt like having a conversation with someone who wasn't in the room. He'd spent his first 2 months in Claremont mostly not doing anything. He'd go to the hardware store, the grocery store, a place on 5th Street called Deacon's that served breakfast all day and had coffee strong enough to constitute an act of aggression. He'd run in the mornings, 5 miles along the Catawba River Trail, and if you'd been on that trail at 6 a.m. and seen him, you'd have noted. Steady pace, no headphones, no watch. Eyes moving in a particular pattern across the landscape that was not the pattern of someone enjoying scenery. He didn't have friends in Claremont yet. He had nods. He had the kind of low-level familiarity that accrues when you go to the same places regularly in a town small enough to notice repetition. The woman at the hardware store who had learned not to try to upsell him. The guy at Deacon's who knew he took his coffee black and who'd started having it ready when he saw Daniel coming through the door. Nobody knew what he'd been. He hadn't told anyone. It wasn't hiding exactly. It was more like the preference for a particular kind of quiet that comes from having spent 20 years in environments where quiet meant operational security, and where that preference had become structural, had become just how he moved through space. His neighbors thought he was pleasant and somewhat reserved. The man at the hardware store thought he probably did woodworking, given the materials he bought. He didn't do woodworking. He was building shelves. Just shelves. Which is something that woodworkers do, and also something that people who need something to do with their hands do, and he was emphatically the second kind. On the night he walked through the flickering lights on level 3 of the Riverside Commons parking structure, he had been on his way back from the grocery store. This part always seemed to want to be significant when Maya told the story later, and she would have to resist the temptation to make it significant, because the significance was actually in its insignificance. A man on his way back from the grocery store. With eggs, she later learned. He'd been worried about the eggs. When he set the bag down, he'd thought about the eggs for approximately half a second, had positioned the bag carefully, had not broken the eggs. He hadn't been looking for anything. He'd heard the alarm first, the civics alarm, which Maya had accidentally triggered, and he'd moved in the direction of the alarm, because moving in the direction of a distress signal was not a decision for him. Not anymore. It was more like a reflex that had been thoroughly operationalized, and now simply happened, the way your hand goes to a hot surface and pulls back before the pain arrives. He'd seen the situation in roughly a second and a half. He'd assessed it in roughly another second. And then he'd said, "Hey, which was not tactical language, and was not a trained verbal command, and was just him, Daniel Holt, 41 years old, saying the first word that came to him in a moment that called for a word. And the word was hey, and it had done what it needed to do because of how he said it, and not because of what it was. That was the thing about training at a certain level. He would eventually tell someone, though not Maya, not for a while. The training disappears. You don't have it anymore. You don't carry it. It becomes you. The same way you don't have English. You don't carry English around. You are a person who speaks English. And the English is just there when there's something to say. The training was just there, when there was something that needed it. Maya did not go home that night. She couldn't. She sat in her car in the parking structure. The police were there now. There was yellow tape on a section of the third level. There were people in vests, doing things with cameras and notepads. And the presence of all these people doing official things made the parking structure feel suddenly ordinary. Suddenly just a place with bad lights where a thing had happened, instead of the place it had been 40 minutes ago. And she couldn't make herself start the car. She kept putting her hands on the wheel and then taking them off. Her sister picked up on the second ring. "Hey," Zara said. And Maya started crying, which she hadn't done during any of it. Hadn't done when it was happening. Hadn't done when the detective was asking her questions. Hadn't done when Daniel Holt was sitting on the hood of a patrol car answering questions of his own, with the particular economy of a man who gave police exactly the information they needed, and found no value in elaboration. She'd held it all through all of that, and now it was coming out. And it was coming out fast. "Maya. Hey, talk to me. What happened?" "Someone's coming to get you," her sister said, when Maya had gotten enough of it out to constitute a summary. "Don't start the car. I'm calling Marcus." Marcus was Zara's husband. He'd been asleep. He was not the kind of person who minded being woken up to drive across town at 12:30 a.m. to collect his wife's sister from a parking garage, and Maya loved him for it, with a specific and grateful love that felt especially large in that particular moment. She hung up and sat there. After a while, she heard a knock on her window. She startled, hard. Her whole body jerked. Her hands flew up, and she registered the movement in her peripheral vision before she registered the face behind the glass. And then she saw the face, and her body recalculated, the alarm quieting. Daniel Holt. He was standing by her window with his grocery bag. The police were behind him. He'd been released from his questioning. He looked the same as he had before. Grocery bag, work boots, that neutral not blank face, with the addition of a small band-aid on the back of his right hand that she hadn't noticed earlier, and that she suspected the paramedic had insisted on for a reason Daniel Holt had not particularly agreed with. He made a gesture, window down. She pressed the button. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "No. I'm staying here until my brother-in-law comes." He nodded. "Okay." He didn't leave. He stood next to her car. She looked up at him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, and stayed anyway. She thought about saying something else and decided against it. Outside, the police finished their documentation and started the process of clearing out. The yellow tape came down. The parking structure returned to its ordinary geography of concrete and bad lighting, and the occasional distant sound of an engine 3 levels up. A car pulled in at the far end of the level. They both looked at it. It was a sedan. Blue. A woman got out, looked at them briefly, looked at the area where the yellow tape had recently been, gathered her bag, and went toward the elevator without making it anyone else's business. The mundanity of it was something. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. He looked at her. "What you did," she said. Is that?" She stopped, tried again. "Was that something you were trained to do, or something you just know how to do?" He considered this for a moment, with genuine seriousness, like it was actually a question worth considering properly. "Yes," he said, finally. She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. The almost laugh was something. It was the first emotion since the crying that wasn't fear or gratitude or adrenaline's ugly aftermath, and she let it happen, Let that almost laugh sit in her chest for a second. That's not actually an answer, she said. It is, though, he said. She looked out through the windshield at the parking structure. You live around here? She asked. Meridian Street. How long? 4 months. I've lived here 11 years, she said. Never had a problem in this garage before. The lights are the problem, he said. Level 3. That bank that's been flickering. These structures depend on sight lines and lighting. You kill the lighting in a specific area, you create a specific kind of opportunity. Somebody mapped this out. She stared at him. They've been here before, she said. Yeah. And the warning last week was establishing that they'd made contact, he said, that it wasn't random, that there was a specific target. He paused. You were the specific target. She absorbed this. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Did you ever do anything to any of them? Interaction at the store? A confrontation? A security call? She thought about it. About 2 months ago, she said slowly. There was an incident. In the store. 3 guys, young guys, were harassing one of my employees. She's 18. Maya stopped. She was shaking. And I told them to leave and they didn't. And I called the police and they left before the police arrived. And the officer took a report that probably went into the same system as the lighting complaints. Daniel Holt said nothing for a moment. Okay, he said. Was that them? Maybe. Probably. Enough that it doesn't change anything. She looked at her hands on the steering wheel. They were going to hurt me, she said. Not a question. Yeah. The left one said it wasn't about money. No, he agreed. It wasn't about money. She sat with that. Outside, Marcus's car pulled into the parking level. The lights swept across them both. Her in the Civic, him standing next to it, and the car stopped, and Marcus got out, and he looked at Daniel Holt with the specific expression of a man who is assessing a situation he arrived at late and is doing rapid arithmetic. You the one who? Marcus started. Yeah, Daniel said. Marcus looked at him for a moment longer. Then he looked at Maya through the window. You okay? Getting there, she said. She opened the car door, stood up. She was steadier on her feet than she'd expected to be. She looked at Daniel Holt, who was already picking up his grocery bag, already shifting, already, she understood now, removing himself from the scene the way he'd arrived, without announcement, without elaboration. Wait, she said. He paused. Thank you, she said again, because she'd said it before and it hadn't been enough, and she didn't have another word for what she meant, but she wanted to try the same word again, because maybe the repetition would do what the word couldn't do alone. He gave her the same nod he'd given her before. Get somewhere safe tonight, he said. And he walked toward the stairwell, grocery bag in hand, and was through the door and gone before she'd finished the thought she'd started about whether she would ever see him again. She would, but not the way she expected. 3 days later, she went to the hardware store on Maple Avenue. She didn't need anything from the hardware store. She needed something to do with the specific restlessness that had taken up residence in her since Tuesday night. The restlessness that is what happens when adrenaline doesn't have anywhere to go, when the threat has passed but the body doesn't quite believe it, when you keep dreaming about concrete and flickering lights, and the particular quality of a sound that wasn't quite a voice and wasn't quite anything else. She'd taken 2 days off work. Her store manager, corporate, she'd finally gotten corporate on the phone, finally gotten an actual human being and not the form portal, had been aggressively apologetic in the way that corporations are aggressively apologetic when they are also quietly terrified of liability, and he'd told her to take whatever time she needed, and she'd thought, I need about 12 years and a different parking structure, neither of which you can give me. She'd gone to Zara's house and eaten a lot of food and watched television she couldn't follow, and had long, circular conversations with her sister about what had happened, and what was going to happen, and what might have happened if the man with the grocery bag hadn't come through the flickering lights. She hadn't said his name. She'd said the man every time, which she would only notice later. On the third day, she got restless enough to need to be somewhere other than Zara's couch, and the somewhere turned out to be the hardware store on Maple Avenue, which she chose without quite knowing why until she was in the parking lot and saw a truck that fit what Detective Rafferty had described as Daniel Holt's vehicle. A dark blue Chevy Colorado with mud on the rear wheel wells and a white scratch along the tailgate, and understood that her feet had known something her brain was still figuring out. He was in the paint aisle, looking at sandpaper. Not paint, sandpaper. He had 3 different grits in his hand, and was comparing them with the focused attention of someone who was actually comparing them, not performing the act of comparison while thinking about something else. She stopped at the end of the aisle. He looked up. No surprise on his face. Not exactly, but something. A small recalibration. The kind that happens when a variable appears that you'd assigned a lower probability to. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She walked down the aisle, stopped a few feet from him. "Building something?" she asked. "Shelves," he said. "Like, actual shelves?" "Yeah." "Okay." She looked at the sandpaper in his hand. "Is that, you need 3 different grits?" "For this kind of wood, yeah. You go too coarse first. You open the grain wrong and the finish doesn't sit right. You have to work down." She looked at him. "That's more information than I expected," she said. Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. The neighborhood of one. "You needed something?" he asked. "I came to..." She stopped. "I don't know what I came to do, honestly. I saw your truck." He looked at her. Not uncomfortable. Not particularly anything. "I just..." She tried again. "I wanted to know who you were. I know your name. The detective told me. But I don't know." She spread her hands in a gesture that meant, "the rest." He looked at the sandpaper in his hand. Put 2 of the 3 grits back on the rack, kept the middle one. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "The detective said you were retired Navy." "Yeah." "What kind of Navy?" He looked at her. "What did Rafferty say?" he asked. "He said the kind that doesn't usually talk about what kind." He nodded slowly. "He's not wrong." "Were you a SEAL?" she asked. "A beat." Then, "Yeah." She absorbed this. "For how long?" 18 years. She did the math. "You retired at 40? 41. Why?" He looked at her steadily for a moment. "Because I was done," he said. She understood, from the way he said it, that done was doing a significant amount of work in that sentence. That done was covering a landscape she hadn't been given access to, and probably wouldn't be. Not today. Maybe not ever. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They stood in the paint aisle of the hardware store in Claremont, North Carolina, with sandpaper in his hand and nothing in hers. And for a while neither of them said anything, and the nothing wasn't uncomfortable. Which surprised her, because she was not usually a person who was comfortable in silences with people she'd known for 3 days, and had met under circumstances that were not standard. "You live on Meridian Street," she said. "Yeah. I live on Carteret. About 6 blocks from you." He looked slightly, almost imperceptibly, surprised by this, or interested by it. Something that was slightly more active than his baseline. He said. "I've been taking a different way to work," she said. "Not going through the Commons for 3 days. But I have to go back. It's my store. I can't just..." She stopped. "I keep thinking about the lights, the 3rd level. What you said about someone mapping it out. I went to building management yesterday." "How'd that go?" he said, like he knew exactly how it had gone. "They were very sorry to hear about my experience," she said, with a flatness that accurately conveyed the tenor of the conversation. "Yeah," he said. "The lights are still not fixed." He nodded. "What do I do?" she asked. And then immediately, "Sorry, I'm not asking you to be responsible for..." "Don't park on 3, he said. "Park on 1, as close to the attendant booth as possible. If there isn't an attendant on duty, use the lot across the street instead, even if it costs you." Don't go to your car alone at closing. Get your staff to walk you out, or call someone to meet you. She looked at him. That's very practical advice, she said. Yeah, I mean that as a compliment. I know. She looked down at the floor for a moment, then up at him. Can I ask you something else? Sure. The three of them. The one in the middle. Was he? He's fine, Daniel said. Sore. He'll remember the conversation for a while, but he's fine. And the one on the right? Also fine. She nodded. Then the left one. Something changed in his expression. Barely. But there. He's the one I'd watch, Daniel said. The other two. They're crew. They follow. The left one thinks. He ran the operation and watched his people fail, and he'll want to understand why. And he'll want to not have that happen again. He paused. Stay visible. Stay in places with people. And talk to the detective, Rafferty. Tell him about the incident in the store 2 months ago. Give him the most specific description you can of the left one. Height, weight, clothing, distinguishing marks. Everything. I already gave a description. Give it again, more detailed. Make it a priority. Okay. She looked at him. Are they going to come back? He looked at her. He didn't answer immediately, which was its own kind of answer. If they do, he said, it won't be in that parking structure. It'll be somewhere they think they have a cleaner shot, which means somewhere they think they've done better reconnaissance. He paused. So be aware of your patterns. Where you go, when you go, routes you take. Vary them. She stared at him. You just gave me counter-surveillance advice, she said. He blinked. What? Vary your patterns. Be aware of your routes. That's counter-surveillance. You just gave me counter-surveillance advice like it was a grocery tip. A pause. Good point, he said. I mean it though. I know, she said. I know you do. She looked at the sandpaper in his hand again. I'm going to let you get back to your shelves. Okay. She started to turn. Reyes, he said. She turned back. He was looking at her steadily. If anything happens, anything feels off, anything you notice, anyone you don't recognize, following a pattern near your store or near your home, don't try to decide if you're overreacting. Just call. She looked at him. Call who? Rafferty? Yeah, Rafferty. And a pause that had a decision in it. He reached into his jacket pocket and came out with a pen. The same pen, she thought, that he'd used to retrieve her keys, and a receipt from the hardware store, and he wrote a number on the back of it. He held it out. She took it. That's you? She asked. Yeah. She looked at the number, then at him. Thank you, she said. Again, because it was still the only word she had. Because it was still not enough. Because it seemed to be the word she was always going to have for this man, and always going to find insufficient. He gave her the nod again. She tucked the receipt in her jacket pocket and walked toward the end of the aisle, and then paused and looked back. He'd returned his attention to the sandpaper, was selecting something from the rack. His grocery bag, a different one, today's trip, was on the floor by his feet. She watched him for a second. Then she went. She put the receipt number in her phone under the name Daniel Holt Hardware Store. She changed it, later that night, to just D. She stared at that for a while, and then changed it to Daniel H., which was more appropriate, and also somehow less honest. She left it as Daniel H. She did not call it. Not that night, not that week, not for 23 days. But she kept it. And she drove to work a different way. And she parked on level 1. And she varied her patterns. The body keeps score. Maya had read that somewhere. She thought it was the title of a book her sister had bought and never finished. And she'd thought, when she'd read it, that it was one of those things that sounded profound, but was probably just an elegant repackaging of something you already knew. The body keeps score. Of course it does. What else would it do? But she understood it differently after the parking structure. She understood it as a literal thing. The body keeps score. 211. That was the weight of 3 people surrounding her in a concrete space at midnight, catalogued and stored somewhere behind her sternum. The body keeps score. The specific sound of footsteps timing themselves to her own footsteps, filed away in the back of her skull, where she'd apparently always stored sounds that required processing that her brain had refused to do in the moment. The body keeps score. The cold that starts from inside, catalogued under warning signs I almost didn't read in time in a file cabinet she hadn't known she was maintaining. She was jumpier than usual. Not scared, exactly. She spent a lot of time in the 3 weeks after the parking structure trying to accurately describe to herself what she was, and scared wasn't quite it. Scared suggested the threat was present, was immediate, was there in the room. What she had was more like her threat detection system had been recalibrated, like she'd been running on factory settings, and someone had adjusted the sensitivity, and now everything registered that she hadn't registered before. The way a man's footsteps behind her in a hallway registered. The way a cluster of 3 people near the entrance of the store registered. The way a car that passed her house twice in 40 minutes registered. Whether that car was actually concerning, or whether she was finding patterns in ordinary repetition, she couldn't tell. That was the part that was most exhausting. Not the fear itself, but the uncertainty about the fear. Denise noticed. Denise, who had been at the store longer than Maya had been alive, and who had seen 3 managers come and go, and who had outlasted 2 ownership changes and 1 attempted unionization drive, and a regional manager named Steve, who had been impressively wrong about almost everything for 4 years before corporate relocated him sideways. Denise had an instrument in her that registered other people's states with the accuracy of old weather-telling bones. She didn't say anything for 2 weeks. Then one morning Maya was in the office doing inventory, and Denise came in with banana bread, the apologizing kind, the good kind, and set it on the desk and said, "You look like someone who's been waiting for a shoe to drop for 3 weeks." "Has it been 3 weeks?" Maya said. 22 days. "You've been counting." "I've been watching," Denise said, which was a distinction she felt was important. Maya looked at the banana bread. She pulled off a piece. "I'm fine," she said. "You are," Denise agreed. "And you're also waiting for that shoe." Maya chewed the banana bread. It was perfect. It was somehow always perfect. She didn't know what Denise put in it that made it perfect, and she'd asked twice and gotten vague answers both times, which she suspected was intentional. "The detective called yesterday," she said. "Rafferty. He said they identified 2 of the 3, the big one and the lean one. From the description, they brought them in for questioning. And they lawyered up and denied everything, and there's no video, because the camera in that section of the parking structure has been broken since July." She stopped. "Which means it was probably broken on purpose, which I didn't know until Rafferty told me yesterday." She put the banana bread down. "The left one, the one who was running it. They don't have an ID." Denise sat down in the chair across the desk. "What about the incident here, 2 months ago? You told the detective about that?" "Yes," he cross-referenced the descriptions. "Same 3, almost certainly." Maya looked at her. "Denise, did you know? When I walked them out, did anything feel wrong to you?" Denise was quiet for a moment. "I knew they were angry," she said, "in a particular way. Not heat of the moment angry, the settled kind, the kind that goes home with you." She paused. "I should have said something. I should have said something," Maya said. They both sat with that for a while. "The girl," Denise said. "Kara. She transferred to the overnight shift at a different location," Maya said. "As soon as I found out what happened in the parking garage, I didn't want her here if they came back. She doesn't know why the schedule changed. I just said there were staffing needs at the other store." Denise nodded. "Smart," she said. Then, "You should have changed yours." "I can't leave my store," Maya said. "Other managers do it all the time." "I'm not other managers." Denise looked at her for a moment, with the particular look of someone who is choosing between several things to say, and selecting the one least likely to cause a fight. "Is someone looking out for you?" she finally said. Maya thought about the number in her phone under Daniel H. "In a general sense," she said. 23 days after the parking structure, at 9:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, she called the number. She'd been closing up. Not alone. She'd gotten religious about not closing alone since the conversation in the hardware store aisle, had reorganized the schedule so there was always at least one other person present through the end of close, even if it meant paying overtime, and the other person tonight had been a kid named Riley who was 19 and studying pre-law and who was, Maya had to admit, unexpectedly good at closing tasks, and who had also been walking her to her car every night for a week without her asking, without explanation, just materializing at the right moment, and falling into step beside her with a casual air that she suspected was his version of looking out for her. She was in her car, level 1, near the booth. She'd just parked when she saw a car she didn't recognize. Dark sedan, tinted windows, parked at the far end of level 1, engine off, had been there when she arrived, was still there. Probably nothing. Almost certainly nothing. She stared at it. She thought about what Daniel had said. Don't try to decide if you're overreacting. Just call. She called. It rang twice. Yeah, he said. No preamble. No greeting. Just, yeah, like he'd been expecting something and wasn't sure what. It's Maya Reyes, she said. You gave me your number. At the hardware store. I remember, he said. I'm in the parking structure, level 1. There's a car that I noticed when I came in an hour ago and is still here, and I'm probably overreacting. Dark sedan? Far end of the level? She froze. How did you, are you? I'm in the lot across the street, he said. I saw it when I walked by. I've been watching it. She sat very still. You've been watching my parking structure, she said. A pause. For about an hour, he said. She thought about this. That's, she tried to find the right word. Is that something you just decided to do? It made sense, he said. Did it? Yeah. She looked at the dark sedan at the end of the level. Is it them? She asked. I don't know, he said. 2 occupants. They've been stationary. Engine off. No activity. That's a lot of watching someone else's parking structure for I don't know. Yeah, he said. Which is why I'm still here. A pause. You should start your car, but don't pull out yet. Keep me on the phone. She started the car. Engine's running, she said. Good. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to walk to the car, he said. She stopped. Why would you do that? To see who's in it. And if it's them? Then I'll know that. She put the phone against her ear and listened to the sound of him walking. Boots on asphalt, a particular steady rhythm, and she watched the far end of level 1, where the dark sedan sat with its engine off. She heard him stop. Silence. Then voices, too distant, too muffled. She couldn't make out words. 20, 30 seconds. Then his footsteps again, coming back. He came into her line of sight from the stairwell entrance, crossing the level, and she watched him walk to her car and stop next to her window, and she pressed the button, and the window went down. Restaurant workers, he said. 2 guys, just got off a shift. One of them is asleep. She stared at him. Oh, she said. Yeah. So you did what I told you to do, he said. You called. That was right. She looked at him. He was standing next to her car with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the light on level 1 was better than level 3 had been. Actually, all the lights were working down here. She'd verified this, had made building management verify this, and she could see him more clearly than she had in the flickering dark 3 weeks ago. He looked tired. Not the tired she felt in her teeth. A different kind. The kind that's in the eyes. Specifically, the kind that's been there long enough that it's not a current event anymore. It's geography. Like his eyes had been tired for a while, and had made their peace with it. Have you been watching every night? She asked. He looked at her. Not every night, he said. But more than one. He didn't answer that. Daniel, she said. He met her eyes. You don't have to do that, she said. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate it more than I can. She stopped. But that's not. I don't want to be someone you feel obligated to watch over. He was quiet for a moment. You're not, he said. She waited for more. There wasn't more. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She looked at her steering wheel, then back at him. Would you want to get coffee sometime? She asked. Not. She stopped. That came out sounding like something it's not necessarily meant to sound like. I feel like I'm always thanking you in parking lots and I'd rather do it somewhere with less concrete. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in that tired geography of his eyes. Something that wasn't quite recognition but was in that family. Yeah, he said. There's a place on 5th, she said. Deacons, they have. I know Deacons, he said. Of course you do, she said. Because of course he did. Of course this man and his grocery bags and his work boots and his shelves and his 20 years of done knew Deacons on 5th Street. Of course that was where he went in the mornings. Of course. Saturday morning? She said. Sure, he said. Okay, she said. She put the car in drive. Get home safe, he said. You too, she said. And she drove out of level 1 and into the street, and didn't let herself think too hard about any of it, until she was at a red light 3 blocks away, and then she sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, engine running, and thought, well, Deacons at 8 a.m. on a Saturday was a specific and genuine experience. It smelled like coffee and something frying and warm bread, and the slightly too old cologne of a man who'd been coming there every Saturday for what was probably decades, who sat at the counter and had an entire separate relationship with the staff that conducted itself in a shorthand Maya couldn't follow. The tables were small. The chairs were mismatched in a way that suggested either a deliberate aesthetic choice or a long series of individual decisions that had converged on something resembling character. The coffee came in mugs that had been washed so many times they'd achieved a kind of translucence. Maya got there first. 5 of 8. She got a table by the window, which she chose because the window had line of sight to the street and the door, and she'd been choosing seats like this for 23 days and wasn't ready to stop yet, even here, even in full daylight, even in a diner on a Saturday, with absolutely no reason to be strategically positioned. The body keeps score. Daniel came in at 8 on the dot. He saw her immediately. She had that impression, that his eyes found her before he'd scanned the room, which was either because she was at the window and therefore obvious, or because he did not scan rooms the way ordinary people scanned rooms but rather processed them in a way that was faster and differently organized, and that had probably saved his life enough times that it had stopped being a technique and become just the way sight worked for him. He sat down across from her. The woman at the counter, not Deacon himself, nobody knew if there was a real Deacon. Maya had asked once and gotten a response she couldn't decode, was already bringing a mug of black coffee before Daniel had fully settled into the chair. Usual, she said to him. Not a question. Please, he said. She looked at Maya. You. Just coffee for now, Maya said. And maybe a minute. The woman went away. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug. He had large hands. She'd noticed this in the parking structure and in the hardware store aisle, and she noticed it again now. Not in a significant way, just a fact about the man, catalogued. She knows you well, Maya said, nodding toward the counter. I've been coming here since August, he said. It's October. She remembers things. Maya looked at her own coffee. I looked you up, she said. He looked at her. Not in a... She stopped. In a very Google basic way. There's not much. Your name and Virginia Beach. A brief thing about a deployment in 2019, no details. And there's a piece in a local paper in Virginia Beach from last year. A community outreach thing. A training program for at-risk youth. Defensive skills. She paused. Your name is in it once. In passing. He said nothing. The program was cited as having produced notable outcomes, she said, quoting from memory. It did, he said. Is that the kind of thing you did? While you were in? Some of it, he said. Toward the end, more of it. Training people. Training people, he confirmed. Which is a different job than the other job. What's the difference? He considered this. The other job, he said. You're trying to end something. Resolve something. You go somewhere, you do a thing. The thing is done. There's a before and an after. He paused. Training. You're trying to start something. Build something in someone else that wasn't there before. And then you send them away, and the thing you built either holds or it doesn't, and you don't usually find out which. Which did you prefer? He looked at the table. I was better at the first one, he said. She heard what he didn't say. She didn't push. The at-risk youth program, she said. Kids who'd been in trouble? Some. Mixed group, mostly. Kids without a lot of structure. Kids who needed to feel like there was something they could do that had consequence. That something they did mattered. And did it? The program? For some of them, he said. She thought about the middle one. The big one. How old he'd been. How that age and that particular expression on his face when she'd hit him, that shock and pain braided thing, had briefly made him look younger than he was. She wondered if someone had tried something like that with him, at some point, had tried to build something. She wondered if it had held. The one on the left, she said. You recognized something about him. His eyes met hers. What do you mean? He said. In the parking structure. When you looked at him. After. There was something different in how you looked at him versus the other two. He was quiet for a moment. I've seen that kind of still before, he said. The operational kind. The kind that means the math is always running. The plan is always updating. He paused. He's done something like that before. More than once. And he's been part of organizations that trained him to be that still. Not military, but something with structure. He paused again. Street organizations sometimes develop that. The ones with longevity. The ones that have infrastructure. Rafferty said they didn't have good IDs on him. They won't find him easy, Daniel said, unless he does something that puts him in a different database. Or unless one of the other two gives something up, which they won't if they're afraid of him. He looked at her. How are you sleeping? She blinked at the subject change. Intermittently, she said. That'll improve, he said. How long? Depends on the person. On whether anything else happens. And if something else happens? Then we address it when it happens, he said. She looked at him. We, she said. He registered this. The particular weight she'd put on it. Yeah, he said. Like it was just true. Like we was a thing that existed in this context and he saw no reason to revise it. She looked at her coffee. The woman from the counter came back with plates. 2 of them. One for Daniel, eggs and toast, and one for Maya that she hadn't ordered yet, but that contained exactly what she would have ordered. She looked at the woman. He told me you were coming, the woman said, without breaking stride. I made a guess. She went back to the counter. Maya looked at the plate, then at Daniel. You told her I was coming, she said. I told her I was bringing someone, he said. She made a guess. A pretty good guess. She's good at people. Maya looked at him. He was eating his toast with the systematic concentration of someone who approaches breakfast with the same principle as everything else. Do it right, do it completely. Don't rush the step you're on. She picked up her fork. Can I ask you something personal? She said. Depends, he said. Why are you in Claremont? He looked up. I told you. You told me you retired, she said. But Virginia Beach has a huge veteran community. Plenty of places to land after 20 years in. You chose a mid-sized city in North Carolina where you don't know anyone. That's a specific choice. He chewed, swallowed, set his toast down. I needed to be somewhere that didn't know what I was, he said. She sat with that. Why? she said. A long pause. Because, he said, the places that know what you are. They treat you like what you were. And what I was is done. I'm not that anymore. He stopped. Something crossed his face that she would think about for a long time afterward. A kind of internal auditing. Like he was checking a fact, and wasn't sure the fact was fully settled yet. I'm working on what I am now. And Claremont is where you're working on it. So far, he said. How's it going? He almost smiled. The neighborhood of a smile. Same as the hardware store. I haven't broken anything I didn't mean to break, he said. She laughed. A real one. Not the almost laugh from the parking structure. An actual one. Brief and genuine. The kind that happens when something lands before your guard is up to stop it. He looked at her. Surprised. Slightly. Like the laugh had been unexpected, and the surprise was at his own response to it, which was something. She looked out the window at 5th Street. Saturday morning traffic. A family going somewhere. A dog pulling its walker with cheerful insistence. The ordinary population of a Saturday in a mid-sized city, doing what people do. I've been doing a self-defense class, she said. Started last week. There's one at the community center on Bancroft. Good, he said. The instructor is a woman named Patrice, who is about 5'2", and has a black belt in 3 separate things, and could probably end me without fully committing to the effort. She sounds right, he said. She showed us a wrist release technique in the first class, and I practiced it on my brother-in-law for the rest of the week, and now he's slightly afraid of me, and my sister thinks it's hilarious. He looked at her, and this time the smile almost made it, coming close enough to visible that she caught it at the corner of his mouth before it retreated. That's how it's supposed to work, he said. The technique or the brother-in-law dynamic? Both, he said. She looked at him. She thought, this is a strange thing. This coffee. This particular Saturday morning with this particular man, who set his grocery bag down with care, because of the eggs, and who had not broken anything he didn't mean to break, and who was, 41 years old, working on what he was now. She thought, I'm glad the lights were flickering. She didn't say that. Obviously she didn't say that. It was a monstrous thing to be glad about, she knew that. She was not glad about what happened. She would not in a million years be glad about what happened. But the thought that arrived underneath all that, underneath the parking structure and the fear and the cold and the body keeping its score was, if the lights had been working, he wouldn't have been there. He would have walked through the level and nothing would have been wrong and he would have passed and been gone before any of it started. The flickering lights created the opportunity for what happened. The same flickering lights that the bad thing used. The same ones that created the cover, the zone of diminished visibility, the specific geography of danger. Those same lights were also what put him in the right place. That wasn't comfort. Not exactly. But it was something. A thought with weight on both sides of it. A thought that kept the scale from tipping completely in one direction. She finished her breakfast. He finished his. The woman came back and took the plates and refilled their coffees without being asked. Outside, the family that had been walking by came back in the opposite direction. Kid now eating something, dog still pulling. The ordinary choreography of a Saturday morning on 5th Street. Thank you for the coffee, she said. You paid, he said. I mean, for being here, she said. For. She stopped. I know you said it made sense, to watch the parking structure, but it did make sense, he said. It was also kind, she said. I don't think you're used to being called kind, so I'm going to say it once, and then not again. It was kind. He looked at his coffee. Okay, he said. She picked up her bag, stood. He stood too, a reflex, old-fashioned, the kind of thing that gets trained in and then stays even after the context is gone. She smiled at him. I'll see you around, she said. Yeah, he said. She walked to the door. At the door she stopped and looked back, and he was sitting back down, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug, looking out the window at 5th Street, with the same attention he'd given the sandpaper in the hardware store, the same attention he gave most things, complete, unhurried, going all the way down to the bottom of whatever he was looking at. She went outside. She stood on the sidewalk in the October Saturday morning and pulled her jacket closer and breathed. Then she walked to her car. She was aware, the whole walk, of her posture, of her hands, of her keys, the correct key already between her fingers, the slightly bent housing familiar under her thumb. She was aware of her surroundings in a way she'd been aware of them every day for 3 weeks. But it felt different today. Not light exactly. Not safe exactly. Just differently weighted. Like the score her body was keeping had a new column in it. 3 days later, Detective Rafferty called. They'd arrested the middle one, formal charges, related to a separate incident 6 weeks earlier that had a witness and a partial plate match. He was in custody. The lean one had disappeared from his last known address. And the left one? We got a name, Rafferty said. She sat down. Okay, she said. Marcus Webb, he said. 29. Born here. Grew up here. 3 priors in 2 different states. Nothing that stuck. He's got connections to a few organizations we've been watching, but nothing formally charged. He paused. He's smart, Miss Reyes. He doesn't put himself in positions where we can get him easy. Okay, she said again. The good news is he knows we have his name now, which means the calculus changes for him. Coming after you again becomes a bigger risk for him than whatever he was going to get out of it. And the bad news? Rafferty was quiet for a moment. Men like Marcus Webb don't always make purely rational calculations, he said. Sometimes the risk calculation loses to other factors. She looked at the wall of her apartment. What other factors? She said. Pride, Miss Reyes, he said. Reputation. The cost of being seen to back down. She sat with that. I'm going to tell someone, she said. Who? She thought about the number in her phone under Daniel H. She thought about a man who had set his grocery bag down carefully because of the eggs, and had then made a compressed, dense sequence of movements that her brain still couldn't fully render, and who was working on what he was now in a 2-bedroom house on Meridian Street, with more books than furniture. Someone who should know, she said. She told him on a Sunday. She drove to Meridian Street because she had his number, but this felt like a conversation that shouldn't happen on the phone. There was something about the phone that would put too much of the wrong kind of distance between the words. And she knocked on the door of the house that was slightly too large for one person, and that she imagined, correctly, it turned out, had more books than furniture. He answered the door in paint-stained jeans and a gray t-shirt with a tear at the collar, and she was briefly aware of the distinction between the parking structure Daniel and the Saturday morning Deacons Daniel, and this one, which was the domestic version, the at-home version. The version that had apparently been doing something with paint before she knocked. Hey, he said. Hi, she said. I'm sorry to just show up. You're not, he said. Which was not a don't apologize and was also not quite a, I knew you were coming. It was something in between. It was a statement about what was actually true, which was that she wasn't sorry, and the sorry was an empty social placeholder, and he didn't seem to deal in those. She appreciated it. Can I come in? She said. He stepped back. The house was, she didn't have time to take it all in. She was focused on what she'd come to say, but she got the impression of rooms that were being slowly filled, rather than filled all at once. The hallway had shelves, new-looking, sanded wood, 3 of them along one wall, half populated with books. The kitchen she could see from the hallway had a table and 2 chairs, and a stack of papers that looked like they might be plans for something, and a coffee maker that was the most used thing in the room by visible evidence. There was paint smell in the air, which confirmed the jeans. Working on something? She said. Bedroom wall, he said. I don't like the color it was. What color was it? Yellow, he said, in a tone that expressed clearly his feelings about that particular yellow. She almost smiled. He gestured at the kitchen. Coffee? Please, she said. She sat at the table. He moved around the kitchen. Efficiently, the way he moved everywhere, no wasted steps. And she told him about the call from Rafferty. The two charges on the other two. The name. Marcus Webb. The three priors that hadn't stuck. The connections that hadn't been formally charged. She told him what Rafferty had said about pride, about reputation, about the calculus losing to other factors. He set a mug in front of her and sat across the table. He didn't say anything for a moment. She wrapped her hands around the mug. "You know someone like that," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Tell me." He looked at his hands for a second. Then, "The operational still. The thing I noticed in the parking structure. You develop that from one of two places. Either formal training, which leaves a very specific kind of impression, or from learning to operate in environments where losing your calm gets you hurt or killed. Street-level leadership. Running something over time." He paused. "Webb's done both, probably. Started in the second, and moved into something more organized. The three priors in two states suggest he's been in operation for a while, and has been good at not leaving evidence." He paused. "But here's the thing about men who operate that way, who use other people as instruments. They build identities around being unchallenged, around being the person who can make things happen without consequence. And when that gets challenged—" "Pride," she said. "Not just pride," he said. "Identity. The challenge is to who he thinks he is. And men who build their identity on being unchallengeable." He stopped. "They can make decisions that don't serve them, because the decision to leave something alone is read internally as the decision to admit they're the kind of person who can be made to leave something alone." She looked at him. "I know that's complicated," he said. "No," she said. "I followed it." She looked at the table. "He's going to come back." "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or he's going to send someone. Or he's going to let it sit and you'll never hear from him again. Because Rafferty having his name is actually the deterrent Rafferty hopes it is." He paused. "I genuinely don't know. And I'm not going to tell you I know." "What would you do?" she said. "If you were him." He looked at her. "I'm not him," he said. "I know, but if—" "I don't think like that," he said. And there was something in how he said it. Not defensively, not curtly, but with a specific firmness. The kind of firmness that is actually a boundary, and isn't apologizing for being one, that made her not push. "Okay," she said. "What I can tell you," he said, "is what I think is most likely. And the most likely thing is that the risk calculation holds. He's got one person in custody, and one in the wind, and his own name in a police file now, and the return on continuing to target you is negative by almost every measure he'd use." He paused. "Unless." "Unless what?" "Unless someone in his world knows what happened in the parking structure and is talking about it, in which case the reputational damage might outweigh the calculation." She thought about the lean one, sliding down the side of the powered-by-Spite minivan. She thought about how that kind of thing travels. "How do we find out?" she said. He looked at her. Something shifted in his face. Not much. Just that micro-movement she'd been collecting. Those small tidal things that passed across his expression like weather that doesn't fully commit. "We," he said. She looked at him. "You said it first," she said. He sat back in his chair. "I know people here," he said, after a moment. "Not the Webb kind. The adjacent kind. People who run programs, outreach work, people who know the landscape." He paused. "I've been doing some consulting, informally, with a couple of organizations, not officially. Just—" "What kind of consulting?" she said. He was quiet. "Community security," he said. "At-risk areas, specific neighborhoods, not policing. Advising. Where are the gaps? What does actual safety look like for people who aren't getting it from the official channels?" She stared at him. "You've been doing this since you got here?" "Since month 2, he said. "That's what you've been doing," she said. "That's what the not woodworking shelves are about. That's what you were doing in that parking structure, wasn't it? You'd been in the area of the Commons specifically." He looked at her for a long moment. "The Commons comes up a lot," he said. "In what I've been hearing, as a location with specific vulnerabilities. I'd been by a few times to get a sense of it. She sat back. Daniel, she said. Yeah. What is happening here? She said. Not a question exactly. A kind of structural wondering. What are we doing here? In your kitchen on a Sunday, with this coffee, and your paint-stained jeans, and the shelves you built in your hallway. He seemed to understand what she was asking, even without the standard sentence structure. I'm figuring that out, he said. Me too, she said. Outside on Meridian Street, a car went by, then nothing. The Sunday quiet of a residential street, lawns, the distant sound of someone's television through a window, wind in the trees that still had some of their October leaves. I want to help, she said. He looked at her. With what you're doing, she said. The community security thing. The advising. I've been here 11 years. I know this neighborhood. I know which landlords fix their lighting, and which ones wait until a complaint goes 3 months in the system. I know which parking structures have broken cameras and where the gaps are. She paused. I know which of my employees have walked to their cars afraid and didn't tell me about it. He was looking at her with that full attention again. The sandpaper attention. The seeing all the way down to the bottom of it attention. That's not a small thing, he said. I know, she said. It also puts you in the conversation around Webb, which I'm already in that conversation, she said. I've been in it since October, putting myself on the other side of it, doing something instead of just waiting for the shoe. She stopped. Thought of Denise, waiting for the shoe to drop. That's better, she said. That's better for me. He looked at her for a long time. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She looked at her coffee. It was good. He'd made it strong, the way Deacon's made it, the way she'd come to like it since Deacon's. Can I see the shelves? She said. He blinked. The shelves in the hallway, she said. The ones you built. Can I look at them properly? A pause. Yeah, he said. They went to the hallway. The shelves were good. She didn't know enough about woodworking to know exactly how good, but she knew good construction when she saw it. She'd once spent a week overseeing a store renovation and had developed strong opinions about load-bearing quality from that experience. And these were level and solid, and the wood had been finished properly, the grain going the right direction, the surface smooth in a way that took work. You use the 3 grits, she said. He almost smiled. Yeah, he said. She ran a finger along the edge of the bottom shelf. There's a before and an after, she said. He looked at her. The shelves, she said. You built them. Before there was a wall with nothing on it. After, there's this. She paused. That's the thing you said you were better at. The other job. There's a before and after, and you can see the result. She looked at him. You're doing it again. He was very still. Not the Webb kind of still. The other kind. The kind that means something is being received. You're building something in here, she said. Meaning the house. Meaning Claremont. Meaning the consulting. The at-risk organizations. The walking through flickering lights in parking structures. The watching from the lot across the street for an hour without being asked. And you don't know yet if it'll hold. He said nothing. I think it will, she said. He looked at the shelves. You can't know that, he said. No, she agreed, but I'm pretty sure about it anyway. The shoe dropped 12 days later. Not Webb himself, not directly. What happened was, Riley, the pre-law kid who walked Maya to her car, was coming off a shift alone at 11 p.m. He'd worked late helping the closing team, something he'd volunteered for, something he'd done without Maya knowing, and 2 men he didn't recognize fell into step behind him in the parking structure, level 1, near the booth where the attendant had already gone home. Riley was not Maya. He was 19, and pre-law, and optimistic about things in the way that 19 often is, and his body had not yet developed the specific library of threat pattern recognition that Maya's had, and so where Maya would have felt the math in the air before the equation presented itself, Riley just walked. And then stopped walking because there were men in front of him, men he hadn't seen approach from the front, which meant they'd been waiting, which meant this was He called Maya. She was at Zara's house. She had his number in her phone because she'd insisted on it 3 weeks ago, had made all her key staff put their numbers in her phone, and had put hers in theirs. She picked up on the first ring. "I need you to tell me exactly where you are," she said, before he finished his first sentence. Her voice was her closing the store voice, the one that was calm because calm was needed, the one that didn't let what she was feeling into the room. He told her. "Stay on the phone," she said. "Don't hang up. And put the phone in your jacket pocket. Keep the line open but get your hands free." She was already dialing with her other hand. Not 911. 911 would take time. 911 would take 11 minutes minimum on a Sunday night. She called Daniel H. He picked up on the first ring. "Riley," she said. "My employee. Level 1. Now." A pause of approximately 0 seconds. "Stay where you are," he said. She heard his door. Daniel Holt lived 11 minutes from the Riverside Commons on foot. He covered it in 6. She didn't know that until later. She was on the phone with Riley the whole time, listening, trying to read the situation from the sounds coming through his pocket, the voices, the way his breathing changed. The men, 2 of them, different from the original 3, hadn't touched him. They were talking, she could hear voices but not words. The posture of it was familiar and wasn't familiar. Intimidation without specific action. The sending of a message. She heard a third voice. Heard Riley's breathing change. Then heard nothing, for about 30 seconds that lasted approximately 4 years. Then Riley said, speaking directly to the phone in his pocket, "They left." She closed her eyes. "Are you hurt?" she said. "No," he said. No. This guy." "I know," she said. "He just walked up and they looked at him, and they left. They just left. I don't. Are you okay?" "I think so," he said. "I'm shaking a little." "That's normal," she said. "Stay where you are. I'm sending." She stopped. She realized she was going to say "I'm coming," and then realized she couldn't be in 2 places, and then realized Daniel was already there. "Someone's with you," she said. "Let him stay with you until you're in your car with the engine running. Can you do that?" "Yeah," Riley said. "Yeah, okay." She hung up. She sat in Zara's living room with the phone in her hand. Zara was looking at her from the couch. "What just happened?" Zara said. "Someone tried to do something to one of my kids," Maya said, "and something stopped it." She stared at the phone. She called Daniel back. "Riley okay?" she said when he answered. "Getting in his car now," Daniel said. His voice was slightly different, closer to the surface of something. "What happened?" she said. 2 men, adult males, early 30s, using intimidation tactics on the kid. No weapons visible. They left when I arrived. Walked away again, she said. "Yeah." A pause. "Maya." Something about the way he said her name. Not Reyes. The way he usually said it. Maya. With something underneath it. "What?" she said. "The 2 men were using the same language pattern the original 3 used," he said. "Same phrasing. Same structural approach. This wasn't random." She breathed. "Webb," she said. "Yeah," he said. He escalated. "Going after you through the people around you." She sat with that. "He's sending me a message," she said, "that he can reach anyone, not just me." "That's what this is," he said. She looked at the wall of Zara's living room. The family photos. The one from Zara and Marcus's wedding 4 years ago, where Maya was holding both their hands and laughing at something outside the frame. The one of Maya's mother at Christmas. The one of Maya and Zara at a beach in South Carolina, when they were 12 and 9, squinting against the sun. He can reach anyone. "What do I do?" she said. "Call Rafferty," he said. "Tonight, now." The description of the 2 men. Everything Riley can give them. This is escalation, and it changes the nature of the case. "And then?" A pause. "Then we figure out the next part," he said. "We." Again. She held the phone. "Are you okay?" she said. A pause that was slightly longer than necessary. "Yeah," he said. She thought about what going from a house on Meridian Street to a parking structure in 6 minutes felt like. She thought about what the last 3 weeks of watching from the lot across the street had cost him, in terms of sleep and stillness and the quiet he'd come to Claremont specifically to find. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah. I'm sorry," she said. That this has." "Don't," he said. "I pulled you into. I walked in," he said. "I walked in on my own, and then I chose to stay in." His voice was even. Not defensive. Just factual. The same way he said everything. "That's not something you did. That's something I did." She was quiet. "Okay," she said. "Call Rafferty," he said. "Yeah," she said. She hung up. She called Rafferty. And then she sat there in Zara's living room, with the family photos on the wall, and her sister watching her from the couch in the specific expression Zara wore, when she was deciding whether to say the thing or not say the thing. "Say it," Maya said. "Who is he?" Zara said. "I told you. Navy. Retired." "I don't mean professionally," Zara said. Maya looked at the phone in her hand. "I don't know yet," she said. "Okay," Zara said. "Okay," Maya said. She looked at the beach photo, 12 and 9, squinting at the sun, the thing outside the frame that was making them laugh. She thought, some things you understand in real time, and some things you only understand from inside them, and you don't know you're inside them until you're far enough in that the entrance is no longer visible. She thought, I walked into the parking structure on a Tuesday night in October, and I parked in spot 14, and I triggered my own alarm, and my keys went skittering on the concrete. And then someone came through the lights. She thought about the eggs, about him setting the bag down carefully, about the eggs being fine. She held her phone. She called Riley back to make sure he'd gotten home. He had. She went home. Rafferty called the next morning. "I'm escalating this," he said. "The incident with your employee puts this in a different category. Webb is now on active watch. I've also reached out to a colleague at the county sheriff's office who has some history with the organizations Webb has connections to." He paused. "Ms. Reyes, I want you to consider, just consider, temporarily working at a different location, just while we—" "No," she said. "I understand that. It's my store," she said. "My employees. If I leave, what does that tell him? What does that tell the people who work for me?" Rafferty was quiet for a moment. "I knew you'd say that," he said. "Then why'd you ask?" "Professional obligation," he said. "I have to offer the option." "Noted," she said. Another pause. "I'm going to do regular drive-bys," he said. "Evening through close. I'll have a patrol unit do the same." "Thank you," she said. "And the man who's been—" Rafferty stopped, started again. "Is the individual who intervened in the parking structure still in contact with you?" She thought about Daniel H. in her phone. "Yes," she said. "Good," Rafferty said. And the way he said it, the specific flatness that had been in his voice when he first said Navy, was back. She told Daniel about the call that afternoon. They were on the phone again. They'd been on the phone more than in person over these 12 days, which was something she'd started noticing. How the phone felt increasingly like a natural extension of a conversation that was always technically in pause but not actually paused. "Rafferty's putting patrol on it," she said. "Good," Daniel said. "He asked about you." "What did you say?" "That you were still in contact," she said. He seemed, I don't know. He seemed like that information was more reassuring to him than the patrol unit. A pause. "Rafferty's a good cop," Daniel said. "You know him?" "I looked him up," he said. "After the parking structure. 18 years on the force, 2 commendations, 1 use of force review that cleared him. Work with the community liaison program." He paused. "He knows what he's doing." She almost smiled. "You looked up my detective," she said. "You said my detective," he observed. "I did say that," she said. She looked out the window of her apartment. I signed up for a second self-defense class, she said. Wednesday evenings. Patrice is moving into a different curriculum. Impact techniques. She says I have what she calls a motivated mindset. That tracks, he said. Is that a compliment? Yeah, he said. She thought about the palm strike, the sound it had made, the way the middle one had let go. What do you think about what Rafferty said? She said. About leaving the store? I think you were right not to, he said. Why? Because leaving is giving Webb data that tells him a specific method works, he said. That he can leverage the threat against people around you to shift your behavior. That's a playbook you don't want him to think is viable. I thought about that, she said. I know, he said. How do you know? Because that's why you said no, he said. You'd already done the analysis. She was quiet for a moment. I haven't always thought this way, she said. No, he said. Is that a thing that changes? She said. Or is it a thing you build? The way of reading situations, the analysis. Both, he said. You had it before, the parking structure. You didn't panic. You did everything right. You kept walking. You got to your car. You hit someone who was twice your size and hit him hard enough to matter. You had the instincts. The analysis is just language for things you were already doing. She sat with that. You're actually a good teacher, she said. I told you I was, he said. You said you were better at the first job. Both can be true, he said. She smiled. She looked out the window. October was almost done. November coming. The leaves on the trees outside her window had given up most of their color and were moving on to the transparent, skeletal phase. The sky above them was that November gray that isn't quite winter but is practicing. I think he's going to move soon, she said. Webb. Yeah. A pause. Why? Daniel asked. Because it's been almost a month, she said. And he sent 2 people to my employee, and now the police have stepped up their presence, and Rafferty has reached out to the sheriff, and all of that increases his risk every day he waits. And you said he makes identity-based decisions when the calculation fails. She paused. The calculation is failing for him. So he's going to try something before the window closes entirely. Silence on the line. Yeah, Daniel said, quiet. She looked at the gray sky. So what do we do? She said. And there it was again. We. She said it without thinking, for the first time. Without the self-consciousness of the previous times, it just came out, the way things come out when they've become true. He was quiet for a moment. We make sure you're not where he expects you to be, he said, and that where you are has the right coverage. He paused. And we talked to Rafferty. Today. About this assessment. He needs to hear it. Okay, she said. Maya. Yeah. You're going to be okay, he said. Not in the hollow way. Not the reflexive way people say you're going to be okay, when they mean I'm uncomfortable with this situation, and this phrase is my exit. He said it in the way that she understood, from the weight of it, from the specific quality of his voice when he said it. He meant, I have assessed the probabilities, and I believe this outcome is achievable, and I am going to contribute to achieving it. She believed him. She didn't know exactly why she believed him, given everything, given the flickering lights and the cold from inside and the 22 days of poor sleep, and the fact that she'd only actually known this man for a month, and had spent most of that month in one kind of crisis or another. But she believed him. Okay, she said. Marcus Webb made his move on a Thursday. It was not the move anyone expected, which is probably the point of being the kind of person who thinks that way. Not what will they expect and then doing the opposite, but what will they expect and then doing something so completely orthogonal to the axis of their expectations that the whole framework of expecting turns out to be the wrong one. He didn't come to the store. He came to the community center on Bancroft Street. Maya had Wednesday evening classes with Patrice. Thursday evening was open training. The community center's gym space was available for anyone who wanted to come in and practice, supervised by a rotating cast of the center's regular instructors. with Patrice overseeing on alternating weeks. Maya had started coming to open training too, not just Wednesdays, because Patrice had been right about the motivated mindset, and motivated mindsets don't want to stop at Wednesday. She was there at 6:30 on a Thursday evening. She was working on a release technique, the wrist release thing Marcus had gotten a thorough education in over at Zara's house, the thing that was becoming as natural as English, the thing her body was starting to know without her brain having to translate. Her partner was a woman named Carmen who worked at the hospital, and who was smaller than Patrice but who had, as Patrice said, a lot of contained energy that has not yet met its appropriate channel. And they were going through the technique, Carmen grabbing her wrist, Maya releasing, turn, step, again. Her phone buzzed in her bag on the bench. She didn't stop the drill. It buzzed again. Daniel H. She broke the drill. 2 seconds, she said to Carmen, and crossed to the bench and picked up. Where are you? He said. Not are you okay? Not is this a good time? Just, where? Community center, she said. Open training. What's? Are there other people there? In the building? She looked around. The gym had 8 or 10 people. The center itself had a front desk, a common area, at least 2 other program rooms running. Yes, she said. A lot. Stay inside, he said. Don't go to the parking lot. He paused. Stay with people. She looked at the door. What's happening? She said. I'm 3 minutes away, he said. Rafferty's been trying to reach you. She pulled the phone from her ear and saw 3 missed calls from Rafferty. She hadn't heard them over the music Patrice played during drills, something with a heavy bass line that tended to swamp everything else. Daniel. I'll be there, he said. He hung up. She called Rafferty. Where are you? Were also the first words out of Rafferty's mouth. Community Center on Bancroft, she said. What is? Good. Stay there. We have Webb under surveillance and he's in the vicinity of your location. Ms. Reyes. We're moving now. He's here? She said. In the vicinity, Rafferty said. Not confirmed inside. We had a unit on him and he made them. He spotted the tail. We lost him briefly, but we have visual again on a vehicle consistent with his near the center. A pause, and she could hear background noise on his end. The particular urgency, without shouting, of a police operation that hadn't yet fully committed to what it was. Stay inside. Stay away from windows that face the parking lot. We're 2 minutes out. She went to Patrice. Patrice was 5'2" with 3 black belts, and what Patrice herself described as a very low tolerance for nonsense in all its forms, and she absorbed what Maya told her, with the specific efficiency of someone who processes crisis through doing rather than reacting. Everybody step back from the windows on the south side, she said, to the room. Clear voice. No performance of alarm. Just a thing that needed to happen. People moved. A few asked questions, and she answered them with the minimum necessary information and the maximum necessary calm, and they stopped asking questions and moved. She pulled the front desk staff into the information loop, put them on the phone with 911 as a concurrent measure, locked the front doors to entry but not exit, a distinction that mattered, and positioned herself near the door to the parking lot with the particular stillness of someone who intended to be the first to know if that door opened. Maya stood with her. You should move back, Patrice said. I know, Maya said. She didn't move back. Patrice looked at her. Then she looked at the door. You know how to use that release if you have to, she said. Yes, Maya said. What comes after the release? Step out of his line. Bring the elbow. Don't practice it in your head, Patrice said. Your body already knows it. Let your body know it. Maya breathed. Okay, she said. The front desk person came around the corner. Police are outside, she said. And then through the front door's glass, Maya could see the blue and white of patrol vehicles pulling up, and through the parking lot side door's high, narrow window she could see movement, more vehicles, and a cluster of people in jackets that read police across the back, converging on something at the far end of the lot. And then, nothing. Waiting. The specific quality of waiting that is actually the loudest thing in the room, louder than the music Patrice had turned off, louder than the police radios outside, louder than Carmen's breathing somewhere behind Maya, louder than the sound of her own heartbeat, which she could hear in specific parts of her body she hadn't known her heartbeat could reach. The front door opened. Daniel Holt. She hadn't seen him come across the parking lot. She'd been watching the south side. And then there he was, through the front door, in the same jacket he always wore, with the same quality of occupying space. And she felt the sound the room was making shift slightly, not because anyone else knew who he was or why it mattered, but because the thing that happens when a specific kind of presence enters a room happens when a specific kind of presence enters a room, regardless of whether you know the reason. He crossed to her. He looked at her for a long moment, doing the assessment that she'd watched him do before, the reading of variables. "You're okay," he said. "I'm okay," she said. "Rafferty has Webb," he said. "They moved on him in the parking lot. They found him in a vehicle near the south entrance with what appears to be enough for actual charges." He paused. "I don't have full information yet, but they moved on him." She stared. "They got him?" she said. "Yeah." She stared at him. "It's over," she said. "The immediate part," he said. "There'll be process. Legal process. Hearings. Charges formalized. All of it. That's not over. But," he looked at her. "The direct threat. Yeah. That part." She stood there for a moment. She looked at the room. Carmen still standing near the bench where their bags were. The quiet of 8 or 10 people who had been part of something without fully knowing what it was. Patrice by the door. The front desk person still on the phone. The blue lights visible through the glass in irregular pulses. The body keeps score. It was keeping it now. The math of all of it. The full 37 days of it. The parking structure and the flickering lights and the receipt with the number and Deacons on Saturday and the hardware store and the shelves and Riley's breathing through a jacket pocket. And Rafferty on the phone. And 3 priors in 2 states. And the organized stillness of a man who had run his operation without leaving anything that stuck. All of it. Tallied. Her eyes were wet. She registered this. Slightly surprised. Slightly not. She turned away from the room. Slightly. So the room wasn't watching her face. Patrice was already hurting people in the other direction. She did this quietly and without drawing attention to the reasons she was doing it. Just suggested there was practice to finish if people were interested. And the people who wanted the redirection took it. And the space near Maya and Daniel cleared. "Hey," Daniel said. Low. Just to her. "I'm okay," she said. She stopped. "I've been holding it for 37 days. "I know," he said. "I'm not." She stopped again. She was doing that thing. That thing where you try to manage the emotion while the emotion is actively happening, which is one of the least effective uses of energy available to humans. "You don't have to be anything," he said. She turned and looked at him. He was standing there in his jacket and his work boots, and he had his hands at his sides. And he was looking at her with all of that attention, the full, going to the bottom of it, sandpaper attention. And he looked slightly more tired than usual, around the eyes, but otherwise the same steady neutral presence he'd been since the first hay in the strobing dark. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," he said. "I know you keep saying that," she said, "but Maya," he said. She stopped. "I'm where I want to be," he said. She looked at him for a long time. The blue lights through the glass were starting to slow. The outside activity was shifting into the post-action phase, the paperwork phase, the standing around phase that follows the moving phase. She could see Rafferty's car. She'd learned to recognize it, and Rafferty himself at the far end of the lot. "I should talk to Rafferty," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Will you?" She stopped. Tried again. "Will you come?" He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. They went outside together. It took 2 more hours. Rafferty was thorough and patient, and asked his questions twice, because that was how he operated, and she answered them twice, because that was the process. And the parking lot got cold, as November pressed its advantage over October's remnants, and somewhere in the middle of it, Patrice appeared with 2 cups of coffee from the center's break room, and gave one to Maya, and looked at Daniel, and gave him the other one. And Daniel thanked her, and Patrice looked at him for a moment with the assessment look of someone who has been in enough situations to know what she's looking at, and then she went back inside without saying whatever she'd decided not to say. When it was done, Rafferty closed his notebook. "We'll be in touch about the formal process," he said. "Ms. Reyes, you're going to get a lot of calls from me over the next few weeks. I apologize in advance." "Don't," she said. "Call as many times as you need to." He looked at Daniel. "Holt," he said. "Rafferty," Daniel said. They did not say anything else to each other, but the nothing they said conveyed something she couldn't fully decode. A mutual acknowledgement, a reading of the situation that went through a shorthand she didn't have access to. The language, she supposed, of people who do particular kinds of work. The compressed vocabulary of it. Rafferty got in his car. She and Daniel stood in the parking lot of the community center on Bancroft Street in Claremont, North Carolina, in the first week of November, with empty coffee cups and their breath visible in the cold. The community center's lights were on behind them. Through the windows she could see the front desk, and Carmen in the lobby, and the corridor that led to the gym, where there were people still doing what they'd come to do, because that was what you did. You came, and you did the thing you came to do, and you went home. "Your car's on the street?" she said. "Around the corner," he said. She nodded. She looked at her keys, found the right one with her thumb, the civic key, the slightly bent housing, the specific imperfection she knew without looking. She looked up at him. "The shelves in your hallway," she said. "Did you finish the third one?" He blinked. "I'm working on it," he said. "The sanding part, or the finishing part?" "Both. Still," he said. "I want to get the grain right." She nodded. "I'd like to see it when it's done," she said. He looked at her. "In the particular way. The going to the bottom of it way." "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She turned toward her car, then stopped and turned back. "You told me in the hardware store that you'd been in Claremont 4 months," she said, "and that you needed to be somewhere that didn't know what you were." He waited. "I know what you are," she said. His face did the thing. The micro-weather. "I know," he said. "And I think what you are is what you're building," she said. "The shelves and the consulting and the watching parking lots from across the street. The 3 grits. Working down until the finish sits right." She paused. "I think what you are now is someone who decides what to do with what he was." He was very still. "You said you didn't know if what you build holds," she said. "The training programs. You send them out and you don't know." She looked at him. "You built something in me. In that parking structure, in one conversation. The pattern recognition, the analysis, the..." She thought about what Patrice had said. "Your body already knows it. I already had it. You gave me the language for it." He was quiet. "It held," she said. The cold was real, but she wasn't cold. Or she was cold and it didn't matter in the way that cold usually matters. The blue police lights were gone now. The parking lot was ordinary. Just a parking lot on Bancroft Street at 8:15 on a Thursday night. "You're going to stay," she said. "In Claremont." "Not a question." "Yeah," he said. "Good," she said. She walked to her car. She got in, started the engine. Let it warm up. Just a second. Just the length of time it takes for the engine to believe in itself, and then pulled out of the lot. At the corner she stopped at the stop sign. She could see him in the mirror, still in the parking lot, not watching her car, not performing attention. Just standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the community center lights behind him. A man who had come to a city where nobody knew what he was, and had been building something there. In two-bedroom quiet and sandpaper grades and paper bags he set down carefully because of the eggs. She went home. November. December. The process that Rafferty had warned her about proved to be exactly as intensive as advertised. Calls, appearances, documentation, the legal machinery of the thing running on its own timeline that had no particular regard for the timelines of the humans it involved. Marcus Webb was charged with stalking, criminal conspiracy, 2 counts of assault with intent to cause bodily harm, and 4 separate counts related to the organized intimidation campaign, which is a phrase that Rafferty used, and that she wrote down in a notebook she'd started keeping, because keeping a notebook made the chaos feel like it had a container. The middle one, whose name she learned was Darius, cooperated. He was 22. He'd grown up 3 blocks from the Commons. He'd been in Webb's orbit since he was 16, and had spent 6 years in the specific gravitational field of someone like Webb, without developing the mass to escape it. She didn't forgive him. She wasn't there yet, maybe never would be. But she thought about him sometimes. Thought about the programs Daniel had described. At-risk youth. Kids who needed to feel like something they did had consequence. She thought about what might have happened to Darius if he'd been in one of those programs at 16 instead of in Webb's orbit. She thought about it and didn't say it to anyone, because it wasn't a thing you said yet. It was just a thing you held. The lean one. She never got his name. He never surfaced. Was still in the wind. She varied her patterns. The 3rd shelf on Daniel's hallway wall was finished in late November. She saw it on a Sunday afternoon when she came over with lasagna. This was her contribution to the ongoing practical reality of 2 people who lived 6 blocks apart and occasionally needed to eat. And she stopped in the hallway and looked at it. It was even better than the first 2. The grain was right. She could feel the surface, ran a finger along it the way she had the first time, and the quality of the smoothness was a different quality than before. Something more resolved, more finished. The right finish sitting right. You used all 3 grits, she said. He was behind her in the hallway. The full process, he said. She turned. He was looking at the shelf, not at her. His face had the quiet of someone who has finished a thing they set out to do, and is allowing himself to know it. It's good, she said. Yeah, he said. She looked at the books on the shelves. The first 2 were half-populated still. He read faster than he bought, or bought in careful batches, or both. The 3rd shelf had a few items. 3 books, a photograph she hadn't seen before in a plain frame, and something small she couldn't identify from where she was standing. She looked at the photograph. 2 men in desert gear, somewhere bright. Both squinting against the sun the way you squint when the sun is a workplace condition rather than a weather event. One of them was Daniel, younger, sharper in some physical way that age and whatever he'd been through had weathered into something different, but clearly Daniel. The other man she didn't know. She didn't ask. She asked about the small object instead. A challenge coin, she realized when she got closer. The brass and enamel kind that military units issue, specific to an organization, worn in the palm of your hand. He looked at it. Kept that from the box, he said. She didn't ask about the box either. She didn't need to. She understood enough about the box. She went to the kitchen and put the lasagna in the oven. And he set the table, and they ate. And they talked about things that were not the parking structure, and not Webb, and not Darius, and not 37 days of accumulated cold. They talked about the consulting work, which had formalized slightly. He'd been brought in officially by 2 of the organizations, in an advisory capacity, with a title that he described as vague but functional. They talked about the self-defense class and the 2nd level of training she was starting in January with Patrice and Carmen. They talked about her sister's observation that Maya seemed like a different person than she'd been 2 months ago, and the fact that she'd had to think about whether that was true. It was true. Not different, she'd told Zara. Same. Just with more of myself in the room. Zara had looked at her for a moment. Is some of that him? Zara had said. She'd thought about it. Some, she said. And some is the parking structure. And some is Patrice. And some is... She'd stopped. Some is just that once you've done the thing you were afraid you couldn't do, the fear doesn't go away, but it changes shape. It becomes smaller. Zara had said, "That's the most you thing I've ever heard you say." She laughed, now, thinking about it. Sitting across the table from Daniel in his kitchen on Meridian Street, with the finished shelves in the hallway, and the lasagna between them. He looked at her. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "I was thinking about something my sister said." "What'd she say?" "She said I seemed like a different person. I told her I was the same person with more of myself in the room." He looked at her. "That's right," he said. "She also asked if some of it was you," she said. He looked at his plate. "What'd you say?" he said. "Some," she said. He nodded slowly. "Is that okay?" she said. He looked up at her. "Yeah," he said. "More than okay." She looked at him, at the tired geography of his eyes that was, she'd noticed, incrementally less tired than it had been in October. Not a dramatic shift. Not the kind of shift that you could point to on a particular day. Just the slow, sustained kind that happens when someone is doing the thing they need to do, when the thing they're building is holding. "More than okay," she repeated. "Yeah," he said. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his hand. He looked at her hand on his hand, then at her. She held his gaze. "Work down through the grits," she said. "Right?" A pause. The neighborhood of a smile arriving, and this time, making it all the way. "Right," he said. He turned his hand under hers. Outside on Meridian Street, November was being itself. Bare trees, gray sky, the particular cold that is an ending and a beginning at the same time, the hinge point of the year. The house was warm. The shelves were finished. The lasagna was there and they were here, and it was a Sunday afternoon in a two-bedroom house that was slowly becoming the right size. She would tell this story for a long time. At dinner tables and in parking lots, and in the community center gym with Patrice watching with her arms crossed, and that specific light in her eyes. She would tell it at the town hall meeting that came out of the lighting incident at the Commons, the one where she and Daniel and Rafferty and 3 representatives from the tenant organizations of several affected businesses sat down with building management and talked about cameras and lights and response times and what community security actually means when you strip away the paperwork. She would tell it to her niece, Zara's kid, when the kid was 12 and going through that phase of 12 where everything feels like either a threat or an opportunity with no middle ground. She would tell it different ways, depending on who was listening. To some people she told the version that emphasized the parking structure and the 3 men, and what could have happened, because those people needed to understand what could happen. To some people she told the version about the lights, the management failures, the complaint systems, the infrastructure of ordinary neglect that turns a parking garage into a geography of danger, because those people needed to understand what to do about it. To some people she told the version about Darius, 22 years old, growing up 3 blocks away. And to some people, the people she trusted most, Zara, Denise, Carmen, Patrice, she told the full version. All of it. The 37 days and the eggs and the sandpaper and the hardware store and the notebooks and the shelves. The ending she always gave them was the same. A man walked through the lights when it mattered. And then he stayed. And those aren't the same thing, and they aren't equally easy, and they aren't equally rare. The first one is a decision made in a second. The second one is 1,000 decisions made over time. Both of them matter, but only one of them is a life.